You know, usually when we talk about medical diagnosis, there's this implicit expectation of precision, right?
Right, yeah. Like, it should be straightforward.
Exactly. It feels almost like engineering. Like
Yeah.
you fall off a ladder, you break your arm, you go to the hospital, and the X-ray shows that like stark, jagged white line across the
Yeah,
bone.
right across the radius. It's totally binary.
Yes. The doctor just points a pen at the glowing screen and says, well, there it is. That is the problem.
You either have a fracture or you don't. The bone is intact or it's just completely compromised.
And I think we find like a deep psychological comfort in that kind of diagnostic clarity, you know?
Oh, absolutely. We want our problems to be visible. We want them categorized and like neatly contained within a bordered image.
Right. Broken or not broken, just clean.
Yeah.
But then you step out of the orthopedic ward and you wade into the world of, say, neurodevelopment or somatic trauma or chronic stress.
And suddenly that beautiful, clear X-ray machine is just utterly useless.
Completely useless. You're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is entirely murky. I mean, you have overlapping symptoms, environmental factors, deeply embedded behavioral loops.
You can't just point to a glowing white line on a screen and say, oh, there is the exact source of your anxiety. It doesn't work like that.
It really doesn't. And that murkiness, that profound lack of a clear binary X-ray is exactly the landscape we're wading into today on this deep dive.
Yeah, it's the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters.
Because we are looking at a paradigm that you, the listener, have almost certainly encountered. I mean, you might even be living inside it right now without even realizing it.
Which is so common. It's this idea that has been hardwired into our cultural and religious consciousness for centuries.
Right? It's this pervasive concept of the daily sinner. And alongside it, there's this deeply embedded assumption that true humility means you have to constantly, perpetually apologize for your inherent flaws.
Yeah, it's a mindset that demands you walk through your entire life fundamentally suspicious of your own nature.
Like you can't even trust yourself.
Exactly. It insists that you are, at your core, just this broken machine that is constantly misfiring.
And the underlying narrative there is that your only hope for survival is to just keep dragging the broken, defective pieces of yourself back to the manufacturer, like every single day.
Yeah, begging them not to throw you into the scrap heap.
Which, I mean, on the surface, sounds incredibly pious, right? It sounds holy.
No, it sounds incredibly modest.
But what if that brand of modesty, that constant exhausting self-deprecation, isn't actually holy at all?
What if it has literally nothing to do with genuine spirituality?
Yes. What if, and this is the massive paradigm-shifting mission we are tackling in this deep dive today, what if this false humility is actually a biological and legal trap?
A trap that quite literally keeps your nervous system in a state of perpetual low-grade fight or flight.
Wow. Okay, let's unpack this, because we have a stack of incredible source material today that engages in an astonishing forensic translation of ancient texts, specifically to dismantle two towering myths.
Right. We're going to bypass traditional English translations today and look at the raw Koine Greek source code.
Yes, and we'll prove why the kainak, the new creation, cannot mathematically sin, decode James 5 as a medical protocol, recontextualize 1 John, and expose what the flesh actually means in Galatians.
It's going to completely flip how you read these texts.
So you call the first major framework from our sources the humility bluff. Let's start with this courtroom setup. What is the false premise of religious modesty? Like, how does this bluff actually work?
Well, the false premise begins with how institutional systems, religious or otherwise, they build an entire culture around an artificial, performative humility.
Performative being the key word there.
Exactly. The system trains people to constantly vocally declare how broken, how messy, and how fundamentally sinful they are.
Right, like it's a competition of who is the worst.
Yeah, and this behavior is framed as the ultimate virtue. You're told, often from a really young age, that by keeping yourself low, by constantly reminding the creator of your inherent failures, you stay grounded.
Like, it keeps you safe from the cardinal sin of arrogance.
That's the theory, yeah.
I mean, I've seen this everywhere. It's that whole, I'm just a wretched sinner saved by grace mentality. People wear it like a badge of honor.
They absolutely do.
It sounds so modest.
Yeah.
You hear people praying, oh, Lord, we are just filthy rags. We are unworthy to even be in your presence.
Right, and it sounds incredibly modest to our modern ears, but forensically, legally, the sources argue it is a complete disaster.
A disaster. Okay, how so?
Because true humility has been radically, almost criminally redefined by this system. If we go back to the original frameworks, true humility is not self-belittlement.
So it's not walking around telling everyone how terrible you are.
No, not at all. True humility is simply agreeing with the unbending math of the court.
Agreeing with the math. I like that.
Yeah, imagine a supreme judge in the highest conceivable court, right? The gavel bangs, echoing through the chamber, and the judge declares your ledger entirely cleared.
Wow.
The debt is completely zeroed out. The legal reality of your absolute innocence is signed, sealed, and ratified by the highest authority in the cosmos.
Okay, so the debt is gone. Period.
Right. Now, if you, the defendant, walk out into the sunlight of those courtroom steps and insist on holding on to a daily sinner identity, if you keep telling everyone on the street how guilty you are, that isn't humble.
It's actually incredibly arrogant when you frame it that
It really is. It is a direct, vocal rejection of the king's signature. It makes you entirely double-minded.
You're staring at a cleared ledger, a document that literally says paid in full, and you are effectively calling the judge a liar by insisting you still owe a debt.
Exactly. You are desperately attempting to pay a bill that has already been shredded.
That makes me think of an analogy, like nobody applauds a debt-free man who stands outside the bank begging for spare change.
Oh, that's a perfect way to look at it.
Right. Imagine someone who just had their multi-million-dollar mortgage completely wiped out by the bank president. The debt is gone.
Zero balance.
Yeah. If that person walks into the bank lobby every single morning, falls on their knees, and offers the tellers a handful of dirty pennies to pay off a debt that no longer exists, we wouldn't call that person humble.
No, we would call them delusional.
And frankly, it's insulting to the bank president who cleared the account. If you've been cleared of all charges, walking into the police station every morning to confess to crimes you didn't commit isn't humble.
No, it's an insult to the judge who cleared you. And that is a perfect visualization of what the source text calls the probation bluff.
The probation bluff. Okay, break that down for us.
Because a pardon with a toll booth attached to the exit isn't a pardon at all.
Oh man, a pardon with a toll booth. That is a brutal image.
It's probation, basically, just with religious branding. And we really cannot overstate the psychological and biological toll this probation mindset takes on a human being.
Now tell me more about the biological side, because that's fascinating.
Well, when you live your life under the baseline assumption that the creator of the universe is keeping a running daily record of your failures, your nervous system responds to that belief as if it were a physical threat.
Right, because the body doesn't know the difference between a physical predator in the woods and like a cosmic predator keeping a tally of your mistakes.
Exactly. Your body literally braces for impact. You end up filtering every single day, every average Tuesday morning, through a subconscious layer of apology.
You're constantly hedging your bets.
Yeah, you hedge your prayers. You hesitate to step into any kind of authority or creative power because somewhere in the back of your mind, your biology is running an error code.
An error code that says what?
That says, I am on probation. I am merely tolerated. I am one misstep away from having my standing revoked and being cast out.
Wow, so you're living in a constant state of impending eviction.
And biologically, this causes a chronic, low-grade release of cortisol.
The stress hormone.
Right. It keeps your sympathetic nervous system engaged in a state of fight or flight, which is completely antithetical to the rest, what the Greek texts call the katapausis, that the finished work of the court actually purchased for you.
So you're exhausted all the time because you are fighting a phantom war.
A completely fabricated war, yeah.
Okay, so if we aren't daily sinners on cosmic probation, constantly trying to scrape together pennies to pay off an unpayable debt, then what exactly are we?
Right. What is the actual identity?
Yeah, if we strip away the false humility, what is the actual structural identity we're supposed to be operating from?
Well, to get to the bottom of that, we have to tackle the second massive myth outlined in our sources, which is the myth of the daily sinner and the deeply rooted concept of the dual nature.
The dual nature. Okay, I know this one intimately.
Most people do, yeah.
This is the classic idea that inside every person there's like a good dog and a bad dog, and whichever one I feed wins. It's the civil war between the spirit and the flesh that we've all been taught is just a normal part of the human experience.
Right. But our sources argue that this concept isn't just a misunderstanding. They argue it is a philosophical plague. It is a Gnostic virus that has severely infected Western thought.
A Gnostic virus.
Okay.
Okay, we really need to unpack Gnosticism for the listener because that's a term thrown around in theology classes, but its actual real-world impact is rarely explained.
Yeah, it gets treated like ancient history, but it's very active.
So who are the Gnostics and what is this virus?
Okay, so Gnosticism was this pervasive philosophical and religious movement that heavily infiltrated the early assemblies in the 1st and 2nd centuries.
Okay.
And its core defining tenet was dualistic pessimism. Essentially, they believed in a profound cosmic horror story.
A horror story.
Yeah, they taught the material world, and specifically the physical human body, was a tragic cosmic mistake. It was a prison created by a lesser, ignorant, or even malevolent deity.
Oh, the demiurge, right.
Exactly, the demiurge.
A sort of blind architect who trapped pure spiritual light inside dirty physical matter.
That's the exact mythology. So in this Gnostic framework, your spirit is a pure divine spark of the true hidden God, but it is trapped inside this rotting, corrupt, physical meat suit.
Wow. Meat suit!
Yeah. Therefore, the goal of salvation isn't about redeeming the body or bringing heaven to earth. It's about escaping the body entirely.
So it turns your physical vessel into the enemy.
It artificially severs the spirit from the body and demands that you wage a violent, unending war against your own physical existence.
But hold on, I have to stop you there. I can hear the listener practically yelling at their speakers right now.
Oh, I know exactly what they're thinking.
Right. Because there is a very famous, very explicit text that seems to mandate this exact civil war. Doesn't the Apostle Paul in Galatians 5:17 literally write that the flesh wars against the spirit and the spirit against the flesh?
And that they are contrary to one another, yeah.
I've heard that preached as undeniable proof of the dual nature like 100 times.
It absolutely reads that way in the traditional English translations, but this is exactly why our sources insist on bypassing the English and declassifying the raw Koine Greek source code.
Okay, so what are we missing in the English?
We have to look at the specific Greek word Paul uses for flesh in that verse, which is sarx.
Sarx. S-A-R-X.
Right. The institutional system, which has been heavily, quietly influenced by that Gnostic virus for centuries, has conditioned you to read the word sarx and immediately picture your physical body.
Right, they want you to think of your biology.
Yeah, your hormones, your capacity for physical pleasure, your literal muscles and tissue.
Yeah, flesh implies everything earthly and bodily.
But look at the glaring theological contradiction that creates. We know from the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verse 14, that the Logos, the divine intelligence, the uncreated energy of God became sarx.
Oh, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us.
Exactly. If sarx inherently means a dirty, sinful, corrupt physical body, then the incarnation itself is a contradiction.
Oh, I never thought of it that way.
The Creator did not fuse with something inherently evil. The physical body is designed to be a holy, frictionless temple. Therefore, the sarx that the Apostle Paul is critiquing and warring against in Galatians, it cannot possibly be your physical biology.
Okay, this is a massive pivot. If the flesh, the sarx, isn't my physical body, if it isn't my biology, then what on earth is warring against the spirit?
Right. What is Paul actually talking about?
Yeah.
In Paul's highly specific forensic vocabulary, sarx is an operating system. More specifically, it is the orphan operating system.
An orphan operating system. I love that framing. Explain how that functions.
Think of it as a mode of existence. Sarx is the legalistic, performance-based drive for self-justification.
So it's about effort.
Entirely. It is the religious sweating, the moral striving, the meticulous rule-keeping, the constant measuring of yourself against an external law just to prove you have worth.
It sounds exhausting.
It is. Sarx is the ingrained mindset of an orphan who fundamentally believes they are separated from the father.
And so they feel this crushing burden to manufacture their own righteousness.
Exactly. Their own safety, their own identity, all through sheer, exhausting human effort.
Wow. So when Paul says the flesh wars against the spirit, he isn't saying your physical body is evil.
No, not at all.
He isn't saying your desire to eat a good meal or enjoy physical comfort is warring against God. He's saying your reliance on your own effort, your religious striving, your obsession with scorekeeping is fundamentally structurally opposed to the effortless grace and rest of the Spirit.
That captures it perfectly. The war Paul is describing isn't a civil war between your soul and your biology.
Right.
The war is between the illusion of separation, which is the sarx operating system, and the objective reality of union, which is the spirit.
And the profound realization here is that the way out of this phantom war isn't to fight your flesh harder.
Yeah.
No, that just feeds the system.
It isn't to double down on your willpower. It's to realize that a completely new operating system has already been installed. Which brings us to the core identity of the believer in 2 Corinthians 5:17. Ah, yes. One of the most famous verses.
Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. Old things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new.
The standard English reading of new creation is almost criminally tame, though. It sounds like a pleasant self-improvement project.
Like a renovation.
Yeah, but the Greek term Paul uses is kaine kaitesis.
Let's break those two words down. What does kaine actually mean in a first-century context?
Kainai does not mean a renovated person. It doesn't mean you took an old, busted-up car, hammered out the dents, and gave it a fresh coat of paint.
So it's not just a better version of the old you.
Not at all. It doesn't mean you just learned some new, better habits. Kaine means entirely unprecedented in kind. It means categorically novel.
Wow.
It describes something that has never existed before in the history of the universe.
And kletesis.
Kinetesis refers to a manufactured entity, a founded colony, a raw, original act of genesis.
So when you fuse them together,
When you fuse them together, a kinetesis isn't a rehabilitated sinner. It is a biological hard fork. It is a completely, fundamentally new species.
a new species.
The source text we're analyzing puts it perfectly. The king didn't just forgive your old dirt. He didn't just overlook your old flaws. He executed that old identity.
It is gone.
It is entirely gone. You are now a new species running an entirely new operating system on entirely new identity coordinates.
If we were to use like a tech analogy to parallel the biological one, it's like someone trying to run a next generation, flawless quantum software application on a completely corrupted, failing 1995 desktop hard drive.
That's a great way to picture it. What happens when you try to boot that up?
The system violently crashes. Error messages flood the screen. The motherboard melts. The perfect quantum software doesn't fix the broken machine. It just exposes the fact that the old hardware is fundamentally incapable of running it.
And notice how perfectly that aligns with what the Apostle Paul says about the law. The perfect law of God didn't fix the old Adamic nature. It just crushed it.
It proved the old hardware was entirely incapable of running the code.
Exactly.
Right, so the cross wasn't a software patch. God didn't just download a quick update into our old corrupted orphan hardware and say, well, try harder now.
No, the cross was a total hardware swap.
The old system, the old hard drive, was completely formatted and destroyed. It was uninstalled permanently. And now, as a kaina quetesis, you are entirely new hardware built specifically to run the flawless software of the Spirit.
And because you are entirely new hardware, a completely unprecedented species, we have to look at the unbending math of what that specific hardware is actually capable of producing.
Right, its structural limitations.
Exactly. Which brings us to arguably the most controversial, most fiercely debated, and honestly most frequently ignored verse in the entire New Testament, 1 John 3:9.
Oh man, let's read it for the listener because it hits like a freight train.
Mm-hmm.
The Standard Translation says, "Whoever has been born of God does not sin, for his seed remains in him, and he cannot sin because he has been born of God."
He cannot sin. That is a massive, absolute statement.
And almost every major religious institution spends an enormous amount of theological energy trying to explain it away.
They absolutely do. They water it down. They say, well, John doesn't really mean cannot. He means the believer tries really hard not to sin.
Or they say, it means he doesn't practice sin habitually, but he still messes up daily.
Right. They soften it because taking it literally completely destroys the business model of the daily sinner, right?
If you cannot sin, you don't need to keep coming back to the religious toll booth to pay your daily fines.
Exactly. The institutions dilute the text to maintain control. But we are looking at the raw Greek source code, and John is not using metaphor here. He is using the language of spiritual biology.
Break that down for us.
John uses the word sperma, for his sperma remains in him.
That is a very physical, biological term.
It is the literal biological DNA, the genetic source code of the Father. John is saying that when you are born of God, you are infused with his actual incorruptible spiritual genetics.
So we're talking about spiritual lineage and inherited traits.
Absolutely. And because this divine seed, this sperma, is utterly incorruptible, it mathematically cannot catch the hamartia virus.
The error code of separation.
Exactly. It cannot be infected by it. And then John drops the hammer with the phrase, "Udainatai hamartanein."
Udainatai hamartanein.
Okay.
Walk us through the literal translation of that phrase. Like, what does it actually mean to a first-century Greek speaker?
It literally, structurally translates to mathematically, intrinsically, and biologically unable to miss the mark.
Unable. Not just unwilling, but physically and structurally incapable.
Incapable. Think about the mechanics of genetics. You are incapable of operating from a state of deficit because the genetic code for lack, the genetic code for separation, simply does not exist in the father's DNA.
Wow.
If an organism is born of a dog, it has the DNA of a dog. It will bark. It will never meow because it lacks the genetic code for a meow.
It's just structurally impossible.
Right. And John's argument is airtight. If you are born of God, you have the DNA of God, and God does not have the capacity, the structural ability to sin.
Therefore, the kinaikritesis, your true, core, reborn identity, mathematically cannot commit sin.
That's the math.
Okay, this is a beautiful, staggering paradigm shift, but I know exactly what you, the listener, are thinking right now, because it's the immediate logical hurdle I hit when I first read this material.
It's the big question.
How does the law fit into this? What about transgressions? Because the law is what defines what a sin actually is, right? If I steal a car, the law says I committed a crime. So how can I be incapable of sinning if the law still exists?
You're hitting on the exact friction point, and it's the perfect question. It leads us directly to the Apostle Paul's brilliant legal reasoning in Romans 4.15.
Okay, Romans 4.15.
Paul writes a sentence here that is so absolute, so definitive, that it is almost terrifying to the religious rule-keeping mind. The Greek text reads, Hui ukastanomos ude prabasis.
And the translation is?
Where there is zero law, there is zero transgression.
Zero law equals zero transgression. No exceptions.
Let's look at the mechanics of that specific word, parabasis. A transgression literally means stepping over a drawn line.
Stepping over a line.
Yeah. The unbending legal math Paul is presenting is this. If there is no line drawn in the dirt, you mathematically, physically cannot step over it.
Because there's nothing to step over.
Yeah.
You can't trespass on a property if the property lines have been completely dissolved and the land is declared open territory.
That's the core of it. The contract, the written code of ordinances that stood against us, that drew all those intricate lines in the dirt, was shredded at Golgotha.
Null and void.
Paul says it was nailed to the timber, it was legally nullified, you cannot break a law that no longer has jurisdiction in your reality.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because Paul actually gives us a brilliant, real-world, highly relatable example of this jurisdiction change a few chapters later in Romans 7.
Right, the marriage analogy.
Yes. He uses the analogy of marriage, specifically regarding an adulterous woman, to explain how a law actually loses its power. Let's take that a step further. Walk us through how Paul constructs that legal argument.
Well, Paul says, imagine a woman is married. She is bound by the law of marriage to her husband as long as he is alive.
Okay.
The law draws a very clear line in the dirt. If she sleeps with another man while her husband is breathing, the law actively triggers. It brands her an adulteress. She has crossed the line. She committed a parabasis.
Because the law has active binding jurisdiction over her actions.
Precisely.
If her husband dies, a massive legal shift occurs. She is completely legally freed from that specific law of marriage. The law only applied as long as he lived.
Right.
So if she goes and sleeps with another man the day after the funeral, she is legally innocent. She is not an adulteress. The line has been erased.
Now, think about the profound implications of this. The physical action, sleeping with another man, is completely identical in both scenarios.
The biology is exactly the same.
The only difference is the active jurisdiction. The law itself is what dictates the crime. And Paul's devastating conclusion is that regarding the old law of sin and death, the husband is dead. The old law is dead. We died to it.
The jurisdiction has entirely changed.
Yeah. The old system, the orphan operating system, the accuser, whatever you want to call it, stands in the courtroom and screams that you are failing. It points at your actions and demands a guilty verdict.
But the Supreme Judge just stares at the accuser and asks, failing what?
Exactly. The contract they are trying to enforce has been shredded. The line has been erased. The old hardware is in the landfill.
Okay, but I have to stop you. I have to push back here on a very practical, grounded level, because this all sounds incredible in a legal, forensic, theoretical courtroom sense. Zero law, zero transgression. I am mathematically incapable of sinning because of my new divine DNA. I get the math.
What?
What happens when I mess up in the real world?
Because you still live in a physical body interacting with a chaotic, friction-filled world.
Exactly. I mean, I still lose my temper and yell at my kids on a Tuesday morning. I still get gripped by intense anxiety. I still make selfish choices that actively hurt the people I love.
It happens to all of us.
If I am a kainokutisis who is incapable of sinning and the law is entirely dead, what do we call those moments? We can't just pretend they didn't happen.
Right, sweeping them under the rug doesn't work.
Doesn't James 5.16 explicitly command us to confess our sins to one another? Doesn't that prove we are still daily sinners who need to constantly apologize and keep short accounts with God?
This is perhaps the most critical juncture of our entire deep dive, because this is exactly how the religious institution maintains its grip on the believer.
How so?
They take your real-world struggles, your moments of friction, and they use James 5 as a weapon to drag you right back into the probation office.
Wow.
But to understand what James is actually saying, to understand the profound grace in his words, we have to completely dismantle the traditional English translation of that text.
Let's do it. Let's declassify James 5.16, the medical tent versus the parole board.
When James says confess your faults or confess your sins in the English Bible, he absolutely does not use the Greek word hamartia.
Hamartia being the noun,
Yeah.
the core condition of being separated from God, the deep identity of missing the mark.
Right. He avoids that word entirely because he knows the kainos cannot commit hamartia. The new creation does not have the DNA for separation. Instead, James uses a highly specific, very practical word, paraptuma.
Paraptuma, P-A-R-A-P-T-O-M-A. Break down the etymology of that for us.
It's a compound word. Para means beside or alongside. Pipto means to fall.
To fall beside.
It literally translates to a fall beside the path, a structural slip, a stumble, or, to use a very physical, relatable metaphor, a twisted ankle in the dirt.
A twisted ankle.
Yes, a paraptome is not a moral crime against a holy God. It is structural damage caused by the inevitable friction of living in a broken, chaotic world.
So when you lose your temper with your kids, you didn't commit cosmic treason.
No, you stumbled. You slipped beside the path. You twisted your psychological ankle.
That changes absolutely everything about how we view our mistakes.
Huh?
A moral crime requires a judge, a gavel, and a punishment. A twisted ankle requires a doctor, a bandage, and a period of rest.
Notice how the authorized response completely changes based on the definition of the event, and we can prove this isn't just an isolated interpretation by looking at how the Apostle Paul uses the exact same word in Galatians 6.1.
What does he say there?
Paul writes, "Brothers, if a man is overtaken in a paraptuma."
If a man is overtaken in a fall beside the path, if he twists his ankle.
Right. What is the authorized biblical response to that slip? Does Paul say, drag him before the judge, shame him, and punish him until he learns his lesson?
I'm guessing no.
No. Paul says, you who are spiritual, katartize such a one.
Katartizing. What does that mean in the first century context?
In the ancient Greco-Roman world, katartize was not a mystical religious word. It was a highly specific medical and nautical term. It was used by physicians for the physical act of setting a fractured bone back into alignment. It was also used by fishermen in the coastal villages for mending a torn net so it could hold fish again.
Setting a fractured bone, mending a torn net.
Think about the logic of a hospital. You don't forgive a compound fracture. Forgiveness is irrelevant to a broken bone.
Right, you reset it.
You restore it to its proper original alignment so the body can function smoothly again without pain.
So James 5 is actually talking about physical, emotional, and structural healing. It's not about legal ledger keeping at all.
Look at the immediate context surrounding James 5.16. He isn't talking about maintaining your legal standing with God in a cosmic courtroom. The verse immediately preceding it says, "Is anyone among you sick? Let him call for the elders."
Oh, wow.
In the first century, understanding of somatics, chronic physical pain, sickness, and systemic breakdown were often seen as the direct biological result of carrying hidden structural damage.
Like unresolved friction.
Yes, a slip or a trauma that never healed properly because it was kept in the dark.
So when James says to confess this paraptuma, this twisted ankle, what Greek word is he actually using? Because when I hear the English word confess, my brain immediately pictures sitting in a dark wooden booth, sweating, admitting I stole a candy bar or thought a bad thought, hoping the priest doesn't yell at me.
The Greek word James uses is exomologou.
Exomology. Let's break that down.
Homo means the same. Logos means word or expression of reality. Ek means out or outward.
To speak the same word out loud? To outwardly express the reality.
It means to align your mouth with the physical, objective reality on the ground. It means to state the facts of your structural damage without hiding them in shame.
Okay, wait. Let me synthesize this, because this is an absolute earthquake for anyone who grew up in the church. James 5 is not a weekly accountability meeting.
No, not at all.
It is not a circle of folding chairs in a church basement where everyone reads a depressing list of their moral failures from the week, just to make sure they haven't lost their salvation.
It is not a parole board hearing. The Supreme Judge is not in that room taking notes on your failures.
It's a medical triage tent. That's what the church is supposed to be. When you take a hit in the dirt, when the friction of life causes you to stumble, twist your ankle, or fracture a bone, you don't hide the injury.
You don't try to walk on a broken leg.
You don't slap a smile on your face and pretend you aren't bleeding because you're afraid of being judged. You pull your trusted brothers or sisters into the room. You exomology it. You speak the reality of the fracture out loud.
Right.
You say, I slipped. I yelled at my kids. My anxiety is crushing me. My ankle is broken. And you let the body catharsis, you let them reset the joint. You bring the slip into the light strictly so the community can administer the healing.
The spoken alignment of a fully justified heir who knows they hold a cleared ledger carries heavy, unbending weight in the dirt. You speak the reality of the pain so the bones can be set.
Wow.
You don't speak it to get resaved, you speak it to get healed. The tragedy of the institutional religious system is that it took a beautiful, restorative, first-century medical tent and turned it into an exhausting, fear-driven, punitive parole hearing.
That reframing completely removes the shame from the equation. I mean, if I fall off my bike and break my arm, I don't feel deep existential moral shame about the broken bone. I don't think I'm a fundamentally evil person because my radius is fractured.
No, you just want it fixed.
I want to go to the doctor so I can use my arm again.
And that is exactly how you should view your daily stumbles, as structural misalignments requiring care, not moral treason requiring punishment.
Incredible.
But this brings us to the final, ultimate weapon used by the religious institution to enforce the daily sinner myth and keep you trapped in the cycle of shame. We have to expose the Gnostic trap hidden in plain sight in 1 John 1.8.
Yes. 1 John 1.8. This is the heavy artillery. This is the verse that gets immediately thrown in your face the second you start talking about being mathematically incapable of sinning.
Everyone rings this one up.
If we say that we have no sin, we deceive ourselves, and the truth is not in us.
It is the ultimate club used to beat believers back into the subservient posture of an apologizing debtor.
Because on the surface, it seems like a massive contradiction. How can that verse possibly coexist with everything we've just discussed? How can the Apostle John say in chapter 3 of his letter that we mathematically cannot sin, but in chapter 1 of the exact same letter say that if we claim we have no sin, we are liars and the truth isn't in us?
It looks like a huge discrepancy.
Was John just confused? Did he change his mind between chapters?
John wasn't confused at all. To resolve this apparent contradiction, we have to look closely at the grammar of the Greek text, and more importantly, we have to understand the historical target of the letter.
Okay, lay it out for us.
The religious system completely ignores both the grammar and the history to weaponize the verse.
Let's start with the grammar. What is John actually saying in the Greek?
In 1 John 1.8, John uses the word hamartia, but crucially, he uses it as a noun, not as a verb.
A noun, meaning a person, place, or thing, a state of being. So he isn't saying, if we say we don't do sins daily.
That's a vital distinction. He is not talking about daily actions. He is saying if we say we do not half-e the core condition of sin.
Oh.
He is talking about the state of being separated, the possession of the bankrupt ledger itself. He is not establishing a daily behavioral quota for the kaitaketesis. He is talking about origin. He is talking about the root disease.
Okay, so if he isn't talking to the new creation about their daily behavior, who on earth is he talking to? Who would claim they never had the root disease?
He is specifically, pointedly addressing the Gnostic operatives who had infiltrated the early assemblies in Asia Minor.
The same Gnostics we talked about earlier, the ones who thought the physical body was an illusion and only the spirit mattered.
Those exact same groups. These specific Gnostics had a very arrogant theology because they believed the material world was fake and their spirits were purely divine from the very start. They claimed they possessed a divine spark from birth.
Okay.
They believed they were an elite class of humans who were never truly fallen.
Meaning that they didn't think they were ever lost to begin with. They thought they were born perfect in spirit.
Precisely. They walked right into John's house churches, sat down among the believers, and claimed they never possessed the bankrupt ledger. They claimed they never possessed the noun of hamartia.
Wow, the arrogance.
And because they claimed they were never lost, sick, or separated, they were essentially saying they didn't actually need the blood of the cross or the physical incarnation of Jesus to rescue them.
Because why do you need a rescuer if you're not drowning?
Exactly. To them, Jesus was just a wise teacher who reminded them of their inherent divinity, not a savior who rescued them from death.
Oh, wow. The puzzle pieces are snapping together. So John isn't setting up a morbid rule that redeemed believers have to constantly admit they are broken daily sinners. He is indicting arrogant Gnostic heretics who claim they never needed a savior in the first place.
He is fiercely defending the absolute necessity of the cross. He is looking at these infiltrators and saying, if you claim you never had the core condition of sin, if you claim you never possessed the noun of hamartia, you are deceiving yourself and you are making God a liar.
Right, because God sent his physical son to a physical cross, specifically to cure a condition you claim doesn't exist.
Exactly.
Applying 1 John 1.8 to a redeemed, blood-bought believer who is already a kaitesis is applying a completely wrong legal jurisdiction. It's an astronomical category error.
It really is.
It's taking an indictment meant for a first-century Gnostic cult leader and dropping it on the head of a cleared, justified, completely innocent son or daughter of God.
It is theological malpractice, and it has kept millions of rightful heirs trapped in a miserable cycle of perpetual, unnecessary confession, begging for forgiveness for debts that were permanently settled 2,000 years ago.
So as we bring all of this massive, soaring theology back down to earth, what does this all mean for you, the listener?
Right, the practical application.
We've gone incredibly deep today. We've
Yeah.
waded through Koine Greek etymology, the forensic law of the first-century Roman courts, ancient medical terminology. But the application of all this data is immediate and it is massive.
It quite literally changes the biology of how you walk through the world. It changes the way your cells operate.
Exactly. By understanding that you are a kainacrisis, that you are a completely unprecedented new species running on flawless divine DNA, you are formally invited to step entirely off the exhausting hamster wheel of self-improvement and religious sweating.
You no longer have to live your average Tuesday mornings bracing for an impact from a God who is allegedly angry with you.
You don't have to filter your relationships, your creativity, or your prayers through a subconscious layer of apology. You can actually stand up straight.
And you don't have to look at your real-world struggles, a twisted ankle, a paraptuma, as a terrifying moral failure that threatens your standing with the Creator and puts you back on probation.
You just pull your trusted circle close, you speak the reality of the pain out loud, you get the bone reset, and you keep walking.
Exactly.
And you certainly, absolutely never have to let anyone use John 1.8 to bully you back into the miserable, defeated identity of a daily sinner.
And if we want to connect this forensic reality to the biggest possible picture, to the actual biological reality of what this liberation looks like, I want to leave the listener with one final, deeply provocative thought to mull over as they go about their day.
Let's hear it. Leave us with something to chew on.
Think about the fundamental law of the old Adamic world. In physics, we call it entropy. In the Greek text, the word is thora.
Thora.
It refers to the scientific, unavoidable breakdown of closed systems into chaos, disease, and deterioration. Everything in the old system rots. Everything decays.
The slow thermodynamic decay of living outside the trust of the Father.
Yes. If that is the old baseline law of the orphan operating system, and you are now officially a kainacrisis, permanently structurally fused with the uncreated, limitless, energetic life of the Logos, how does that change your actual physical biology?
Oh, that's incredibly deep. If the hardware is new, how does the body respond?
What happens to your physical nervous system when you finally, truly stop fighting a phantom civil war against a daily sinner that no longer exists? What happens to your cellular structure, to your aging process, to your immune system, when the chronic cortisol of religious fear finally stops pumping through your veins, and you simply allow your body to be the holy, frictionless temple it was originally designed to be?
You stop fighting against yourself. You finally breathe. That X-ray machine we talked about at the very beginning of the deep dive, it isn't murky anymore. The fracture has been set. The diagnostic muddy waters completely clear up the very moment you realize the old sick patient is dead. And the new patient sitting on the exam table has flawless genetics.
You finally step out of the probation office and you step into the estate.
And that is a beautiful, peaceful place to leave it for today. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We hope this exploration empowers you to step out into your world not as an apologizing nervous debtor begging for spare change outside the bank, but as a sovereign, fully funded, structurally flawless heir. Stay curious, stay lucid, and we will see you in the next deep dive.